Thank you all for joining us again. Just a quick check-in. We've got a lot to cover today, but I just wanted to remind you that that where we are in the process, I think all of you are really up to date on your registrations and working on your write-ups, the shorter version of your specific aims. And some of you have also reached out to your program manager. If you haven't finished that part, this sort of initial step of reaching out, don't worry, because what we're doing is still working to find, to match you to the right program, the right topic, and therefore the right program manager. And as some of you had discovered in our one-on-ones, part of that process is really defining the team and more carefully scoping the work so that you fully know what you're asking for before you even start, right? So it's a bit of an iterative process, and just give yourself patience, because we're not in a hurry. We're just trying to do this in lockstep so that nobody falls behind. Okay, so Dan knows I'm a sucker for graphics, and I love this particular one that he created for us today. Because we want you to know that we are still in the pre-proposal stage. So this is another way to show you the gating items, the process flow and decision tree. So Dan, you want to talk about this.
I want to talk about this a little bit, because sometimes people get a little confused about this idea of this concept write-up. And what I want to do is sort of talk about my process for just a second of when I get an idea, or me and my friends get an idea. So there's this other part that's not here. It's this ideation stage. But before that, there's like beers, bike rides, steam rooms, something like that, where these ideas come from. But we sort of end up in this idea stage, ideation. And to me, if I have an idea that is interesting and worth pursuing, I do a concept write-up. The first thing I do is a concept write-up. And that's truly, for me, the first gating process. Is if I'm not willing to write a concept write-up for that idea, then I need to shelf the idea, put it back away, do something else with it. All right. But within that, once you do the concept write-up, and this is just a big circular swirl, you do some preliminary research, some validation. If I was a scientist, I might do something in the lab. Since I'm not a scientist, most of my ideas have to do with theories around software or different theories. So you sort of look what's going on in the space. You look at the IP that's going on. You do the market opportunity. You say, okay, what opportunities are there? Are there specific SBIR topics that I like to look at? And then I start thinking about the team and collaborators that I need to have. So who's my dream team? What kind of people do I have to get? And this thing goes around, the concept write-up gets sort of iterated multiple times. And I use that concept write-up when I'm trying to recruit team members, talk to program managers during the opportunity identification and stuff. And this is all happening what I would call a pre-proposal time. All right. So at some point, we're going to go from pre-proposal to a proposal. And once again, there's another go, no-go decision. Do I really want to do a proposal? Does it make sense to put the effort into writing the specific aims and the like? And when I'm looking at this, when I say proposal, this is just the written part of the proposal. It's not all the bio sketches and all this other stuff. This is just the written part. If I decide to do the specific aims, I write the specific aims. They might swing back to the opportunity identification or a program manager for review there and back and forth. Once I get those mostly nailed down, I do the approach, the why, who, what, when, where, how that we're going to do, describing those specific aims of work that needs to be done. And once I'm happy with that, I do the draft budget. And this is key because most of the time we get things over scoped. So looking at that budget, putting the hours to the tasks that I have, that's, once again, I might go back and change my specific aims. I might decide that, hey, these specific aims don't work, or I don't have enough budget to do this within the context of SBIR. So there's another opportunity for go, no go at that point. And then once I'm happy with the budget, that's when I finally get around to writing the innovation and the significance sections. You've already looked at the significance and the innovation for this back here in your preliminary research. So that there's enough of a market share. So it's a significant enough problem that you need to do something. That there's a lack of innovation, or what the holes are in the marketplace. So you've sort of done some preliminary stuff around that to begin with. So that's not fresh ideas for you. But that's sort of, this pre-proposal section can last, I don't know, anywhere from 15 minutes to I think I have an idea. I actually have a spreadsheet with my ideas that I've written concept write-ups for. And I think I might have an idea that's out there that's 15 years old that I still haven't completely given up on yet. But that's sort of how I look at this concept write-up, and that this is the churning of the idea, and then we get into the formal proposal side. And all this churning of the ideas is what's informing our proposals. Is that helpful to anybody besides me? And everybody does this stuff different, so keep that in mind. You might come up with your own process. This is sort of what my process has looked like for probably 15 or 20 years. And I think that's all I have to say, Karen, about that,
Okay.
which was
All
a
right,
lot.
that's good. I saw at least one thumbs up, and I saw Christina shaking her head.
Like shaking,
And
like, oh my God.
Joshua likes your graphics too. So I'm not the only one. Thank you. I'm a very visual learner, so that helps me a lot too. Um, and honestly, the go no go thing is also kind of a little bit my influence, because I'm the one that says you don't have to do this if at any point you need to stop. And you also can try again and approach it from another way, or work with another agency. So there's no harm in not completing, but I know we are focused on completing. Oh, and I didn't even offer any kind of federal funding disclaimer at the top of this meeting, but for anybody who has been wondering about NIH federal funding for SBIR, we are moving forward as if. Okay, that's all I'm going to say about that. That's really what we're going to do, and I think that's what a lot of the rest of the country is doing. So until we hear otherwise, there might even be like a delay, perhaps. If we do that, hey, that's just more time for us to keep working on this. So we are forging ahead. We're excited about this. Okay, so
Hey, can I share my screen? I got his thing
yes,
open, and I can talk to this.
you can talk to this. And Eric's not here. I don't. Yeah. Derek's here. Okay, but and Eric's here. I see you now. So we asked for permission to share this with you guys today. I just need to quit mine, Dan, if you want to grab yours.
Yeah.
Okay, there we go. Now you have it.
Yeah. Is that so? Am I sharing now?
Well, we've got chat up.
Chat.
It's the wrong window, I guess.
All right. Let me stop sharing that and try again. Thought I picked the right window. Documents screen. Up squad. There we go. Let's try that.
Meanwhile, Michaela said that her meeting was canceled, and her officer asked if she could reschedule. So she's just a little concerned that it might delay things. But thank you for sharing that, Michaela.
Yeah. So our up squad group volunteered to let us share sort of their sausage making, we'll call this, right? And so basically the 10-second pitch is basically what they're trying to do is help with healthcare, trying to get career paths in place for sort of matching up healthcare organizations with potential employees, especially for some of the entry level jobs. I think that's the 10-second pitch. And they basically, so to watch their sausage making, they basically had a concept write up, sort of the 4 paragraphs about what's the problem, what's the innovation, what are we going to do in the research, and then, what's the impact. And then And then they started messing around with the idea of building the specific aims. And you can see these iterations. You see comments from me and Karen and other people trying to, and what the team and Eric especially had done is he was just copying the same thing in the same document, so making a new version. So we did multiple iterations, mostly talking. And the biggest problem I would say was trying to nail down what the goals were, or the research goals. So that's sort of what we were messing around with, talking about objectives and things like that. But ultimately, where we got was to this specific aims page, which is once again, some real numbers around what the problem is. Here's an innovation. Here are the different tasks. We got 2 aims, building the platform and then doing testing and different research. And then looking at what the outcome is, So if we do all this, this is the outcome. And I believe Eric sent this to a program manager. Is that correct, Eric?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So from the program manager, what I did, and I'm sure Eric fixed it before he sent it, at the bottom of the same document. So there's a concept write-up. I went ahead and just asked chat to do an email for the program manager based on this stuff. And they came up with a pretty decent email. I mean, usually these emails are about 80% right if you ask it the right question. And then at the bottom, what I usually do, and I'm not sure what Eric did, but usually under my signature block, if this would be our signature block, I would just cut and paste the specific aims, because a lot of government workers don't like opening attachments, or they might be actually instructed not to open attachments. So usually you're better off just cutting and pasting it in the under the signature block and just say that you're going to do that. But that's sort of the sausage making of, concept write-up through multiple iterations of specific aims to a sort of quasi-final specific aims to the letter to a program manager. So Eric was nice enough. When we were working with him the other day, I said, this would be great if we could share this. And that's what they did. So I don't know. Can you say anything about do you want to talk at all about that process, those iterations, Eric? Was that a helpful process to understand what was going on?
Definitely. And we came in certainly as amateurs, a little naive to the process. So working with Karen and Dan, super helpful. I'm sure everybody on the call is doing that to some degree, but certainly take advantage of that. If you're not, it's well worth the time. And to clarify one thing that Dan said, what you're seeing on the screen now is roughly 1 page, right? So Dan asked us to try to get this to right at 1 page. The references are just below, but all the content is there on 1 page. And that's what I cut and pasted below my email signature, right? So to reiterate, this 1 pager got turned into that short email, right? Here's a summary of the concept, and then the 1 page went below the email signature. And then what you're seeing here, I know this looks like a lot of chicken scratch, for lack of a better term, but is each time that Dan provided feedback, then I would create version 2 and then version 3 using the same core paragraphs, and we may have changed certain elements, right? And most of the time, as everyone on this call can agree, it's how do we get this down to less content, right? And really just drilling down to the most important elements. I think the last thing I'll say, Dan, would you mind scrolling? There's a section down about halfway where there's some blue highlights. And you had asked for this, I think it's like a how, what, right there, right?
Yeah.
That format was really helpful in coming up with really the deliverable piece, right? So the why, who, what, where, when format as we went through each of the sections really gives you a good sort of structure to work with.
Right. Yeah. So sausage making, and this is the process that Eric did, and sort of his team was using the same document, but this is sort of the same process I use all the time. So I just wanted to let you know that's sort of the idea of that concept write-up. You got this idea swimming around, and you gotta, how do I get it out of my head and somewhere else, and do I really want to do anything with it? And this is sort of a declarative statement of saying, yeah, it's a good enough idea that I want to do a specific aims and talk to the program manager. So I think that's all I wanted to say on that. And that was probably like 10 minutes longer than Karen was planning. So
Oh, that's perfect. No, because what we're doing is scaffolding. I mean, I've taught in the past, and Dan's a really good teacher. And so what we want you to see is the iterative process, because all of this is valuable work now, because it is going to impact the rest of the proposal, and you're adding to it. And so I asked for the sausage making to be shown, because so often that's the piece that's missing from these cohorts, is that it's, people are sensitive about sharing, their proprietary work, but it really helps. It's a great learning tool to be able to see kind of how it's done. And we are working with each one of you one-on-one. Your co-counseling team is here. Several of us are working with, together for one client. And so you will get a lot of input, and you will get maybe some different opinions. It's still incumbent on you, of course, to decide which things you need to incorporate or which things you think are a good idea. But we want you to have the benefit of all of these brains in the room. And why is my audio muffled? Thank you for the feedback. It's at 100%. I don't know what's going on with my sound. Now, is that better if I lean forward? Okay, I'm just going to keep, there must be a sweet spot for this new computer I had. Joshua says, met with the program director at NCI today, who said, be sure the specific aims are formatted exactly like their institute suggests. Okay, that's good input. All right, so, and if you're ever in doubt, the instructions are on the website, and they're also in that PDF that we have supplied you with. Okay, great.
I can share again.
Yeah, I will share
Cool.
again. Thank you. Okay, so we left that link in the slideshow. You're going to have a copy of the slides, so if you want access to that, Eric, that's a single document. They're not going to see your whole folder. So if you're okay with me leaving that in there, I'm going to.
No problem. Maybe someone has some ideas they want to share that could help us. So
Yeah. It
that was
takes
a
a
joke.
village. Takes a village. Takes a village. Okay, so the check-in today also is, you can begin completing the forms in ERA Commons and in grants.gov, or doing the part that isn't the proposal, the heart of the proposal. And we wanted to encourage you to, continue acting as if, keep moving forward. And then this extra note, program managers are not gatekeepers. That's a nuance. Dan, you brought that up the other day. Do you want to talk
Sure.
about that?
Sure. I mean, there's a lot of times where I've gotten negative feedback from a program manager, or them saying, wow, this isn't the best idea. But with NIH, it's not like NSF, where they can shut you down. NIH, you can still submit your proposal. And I've gotten things that the program manager didn't want funded. I've gotten those things funded. So keep that in mind, even if we get like lukewarm, or if you get negative feedback, it's probably, we need to readdress something. We're missing something. But if it's lukewarm, I'd say just make sure you go ahead and do it. They're not the gatekeepers, where they come into play as if something's on the margins. As far as if you got a perfect score, you're going to get funded. If you got a marginal score, then that program manager might come into play of what kind of relationship you have with them. But that's the way I would look at it.
Okay, great. All right, so we added again your important links on the slide. This is the folder with all of the instructions and templates for the whole course. This is what we've gone over on the concept write-up, the specific aims template. Today, we really want to move another step forward and talk about the approach. Dan, did you want me to show the work plan matrix? You want me to open
Sure.
that now? Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
Oh, we made it so that you can copy it and rename it, right? Because we don't want everybody editing in the same doc. So when it pops up, you'll see that you're going to resave and rename your own. If you want to use this, this is what it looks like.
And can you blow that up a little bit? Go to 150% or something. All right. So this is Enabled Ventures approach. They started this, I don't know, a billion years ago. I mean, Enabled Ventures is who I took my first SBI workshop from, I think 2004 or something like that. So I have specific aims and we have these tasks, so we got the high level aims and then we have the tasks that are in our specific aims that we think we're probably going to have to do. And this is where you start really fleshing out those ideas. You take your aims, you look at your task, you say, what are the deliverables? Why are you doing this task? What questions are you answering? What are the deliverables from the task? How long is it going to take? What kind of skills or people are going to be doing it? How many hours per person? Equipment and facilities that might be needed. Is it a subcontractor or a consultant doing it? And then the human and animal subjects, whether that's involved there or not. And hopefully we don't have very many human. I think we only have one animal, one person doing something with animals, and we might have a little bit of human work, but it's pretty light. But these are and usually, some people use this matrix. I have clients that have done it and, love using it. The structure, some people don't like using the structure. I personally, I don't know, sometimes when I feel like something's over scoped when I'm working with somebody, I try to make sure that we go through this and look at the hours and stuff. So it's a good way of keeping your scope in check, especially once you start putting down hours, how much time something's going to take. So this is work plan matrix. It's one tool that's out there. It is Enable Ventures approach. But
Before you actually total everything up and start dropping things into your budget.
yeah, I mean,
it's a planner. It's a planner.
Yeah, it's a planner because when you're done, because when you're budgeting, the budget templates, I have one version of a budget template that breaks things out by aim and task. But generally the budget template is just, how many hours is a person going to work? Each one of these people, what kind, I have programmers, how many hours are they going to work and that type of thing. So it gets a little bit, yeah, a little, it's summarized, and that's the problem with trying to use just the budget template and not have a matrix that you're working with, the work plan matrix, is that you're just summarizing. You're saying, okay, this guy's going to work 500 hours, and you put 500 hours in there, but you haven't really figured out how are we breaking up those hours. So that's what it does for you. And I can't hear you now, Karen, if you were saying something. Are you open the next one?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
A little bit.
Okay, so we're also going to, can you hear it?
I can hear you now.
I'm at 100%. I'm just leaning forward.
Yeah.
My computer is literally like 6 inches away from me. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so we also, what?
Oh, go ahead.
We also wanted to show you the method for writing the proposal itself. So this is what we recommend that you use. You don't have to, but it's a one-pager that just really simplifies. And if you're not comfortable with Google Docs, and I didn't learn to use Google Docs until 2 years ago. So this kind of forces the issue, but when you're doing a collaborative project like this, it really helps to have everybody be able to look in and work on the same document. So tell me where you want to go, Dan.
Well, let's just say how this is structured. So if you look in Google Doc, you have these tabs here. So probably about 3 or 4 years ago, I started just putting everything in one document just because it makes it so you're not version control gets easier. If you're having multiple people review stuff, they don't have to go from document to document. They just say, okay, I'm going to go to, specific aims, or I'm going to go to, I need to look at the budget justification next. And it's all in one document. So I don't know, this is a lot of blood, sweat, and tears over time of version control that sort of drove me to this. But within this document, each one of these sections, so if we go to, like, for instance, we're talking about approach now. So click on, it's actually, you're there already because it's so what you see there are, in the red, are the instructions that actually came out of the instruction manual that there's a link to at the very beginning of this document. Usually when I'm filling out anything on assist or grants.gov, I have the instruction manual and the solicitation both open at the same time, reading the instructions as I go. So when you're in grants.gov and other places, have those instruction manuals open and be looking at them as you're going, because otherwise you're yeah. And keep in mind that whatever's in the solicitation overrides what's in the instruction manual. So if the solicitation gives you specific instructions, follow the solicitation instructions. So that's why it's important to have them both open at the same time and make sure that the solicitation isn't giving you contrary instructions, which happens sometimes. So the other thing that I put in here is, if you go to the very bottom, so I mean, everything's in here. So we got bibliography, references, budget justification, facilities, equipment, other attachments, which I don't think anybody here will have. But see that last piece, which is the letters of support? Click on that. So I put my draft letters of support in here. So usually if I'm asking somebody for a letter of support, I send them what I want them to put on their letterhead and adjust. But this is where I would put the draft letters of support, and then I would, make a separate document when I send them to whoever I'm sending them to. But truly, I mean, besides bio sketches and other things, I have one Excel file that has all my data, my one.
I'm losing Dan now. Dan, you're breaking up.
File.
Connection issues today.
Dan, you might try turning off your video. It might help your bandwidth.
Hey, hang on a second. Sometimes my bandwidth here gets a little bit stupid. But hopefully I've stabilized a little bit. So like I was trying to say, is I put everything in here, document like this, one Excel sheet and one slides thing for things. All right.
All right, and to Joshua's point, yes, make sure that if you can, get a letter of support from an investor. Do you want to talk about how you typically would do that? Or put it in the chat if your sound isn't cooperating.
No, I think I'm better now. Am I better now?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the office internet was unstable, so I went to my hotspot. So letters of support, we'll talk about the hierarchy of letters of support. We can do it today, but we want letters from customers, letters from investors, and then letters from collaborators, sort of in that order. So, and the last letter we want is the letter from your grandma saying, "Hey, he's a good kid, give him some money." But it's to me the priority is customers, and then investors, and then collaborators, is sort of the priority. So our letters, we want letters, and if we only have collaborator letters, we sort of have some problems. Wow,
Katie,
that's very,
Katie,
very helpful from Katie. So
thank you.
yeah.
That's right. We will reach out or help you establish connections in the state of Arkansas. And typically those letters are not binding. So our investor folks in Arkansas are used to being able to supply those, and they understand the importance and the gravitas that they add to the proposals. Okay.
And so can you hop back there too?
Uh-oh. Oh, I'm sorry. I already have that open. You want to go back to the proposal?
Just go down to the approach thing. And I just want to talk about, since we're talking about approach today. So if you just click on approach, and this stuff at the bottom of approach is stuff this is sort of the order of how I like to talk about this stuff. So I open the approach section with the discussion of the team and the responsibilities, why they're there. Introduce the hypothesis and the aims that are described in the specific aims. So it's just once again a reiteration of what's in the aims. From there, I show the project schedule, which once again is a reiteration of what the aims are and what the tasks are. And then from there, what I like to do is just then describe each specific aim and each task, maybe a paragraph or so of, who, what, why, when, why, how, all those things for each of the tasks. That's the structure that I like to follow. There are no right rules or anything, but if you look at the examples that are in NIAID that have been funded and stuff, they pretty much follow this structure. One of the things that's weird with NIH is they don't really, if you look at their instructions, they don't really have a place to talk about the team. So it's really weird, but I've sort of found that it seems like a good thing to just start this section with the discussion of the team and who's doing what and sort of why they're doing that.
Also, I'll add that the reason those instructions are in red is so that we've made it convenient for you to follow along. We have literally cut and pasted these from the instructions, so they won't be different from what you're getting from NIH, but we put them in here so you can see them and then delete them when you're done. And we have a couple of questions for you, Dan. Let me go back a little ways. Michaela wants to know, is it better to facilitate these conversations with investors sooner than later? And how much do they need to see? How much do the investors need to see of the proposal, I mean?
I think Katie should probably talk. I know my investor letters, I can usually get by with a specific aims page or a concept write-up even, but these are people I've talked to quite a bit over the years and actually have never taken any money from them. So, so there's that. But Katie, what happens there with your?
When I say Catherine has also put herself off mute, so Catherine wanted to hear what you say.
Oh, I was just going to say, for most letters of support that we do for phase ones, if it's SBIR, I can get you an investor letter of support from AEDC, the Arkansas Economic Development Commission, because they will do an SBIR match up to $50,000 for phase one, and that's considered an investor letter of support. And I really we may even have in the Google folders an example, but all I really need is the name of the title, obviously your name, it'll be written to you, and a brief description of the technology. And there's other programs at AEDC that we'll reference. So I can work with everyone in the cohort to get a letter of support if they're doing SBIR. And then Katie, I know you got some other connections too.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Catherine, of the AEDC letter, specifically for the SBR match. And I think from the investor standpoint, I think what reviewers really want to see with that is that they want to see you sustainable, and they want to see that you, like, their dollars aren't just going to go to waste, that they're actually there's and if you have that connection with an investor, or even like the AEDC connection, it just shows that you've got additional funding that this could unlock if you were to get, to phase one or past phase one and phase two. I know I have some connections with some investors who, I mean, you're not going to get an investor, I don't think, at this early of a stage, and it just depends on your company and where you're at. But I don't think that you'll get an investor, or it's not typical that you'll get an investor that says that they will fund, a commitment of how much they will fund. I think what you will more than likely get is like, they're something around the lines that they're interested, that they've talked to you, they're really excited about this work, and that, depending on if you get phase one, phase two, and then some agencies, Dan, I can't remember if NIH does phase 2B, but some agencies offer phase 2B, which that is where you do have to bring on outside capital besides just your SBIR. And so some, depending on the investor, and that, and this can go into the weeds, and I'm getting into the weeds a little bit with it, but you have to have, some of these investors are not familiar with the phase 2B and the purpose of it. And so there's some education that comes around with that as well when you're talking to an investor. But I also think some of you guys are just, you're not there yet. Some of you guys are there yet, and you can start having those conversations. I think it's good to know the investors that are out there, see what see their portfolio, understand them more, kind of like what you're doing with NIH. You're getting to understand them more. And depending on the company, it might be good to have a conversation with that investor, but just going in as like just a get to know you kind of thing, not they're asking for money at this point. And then really quick too, Christina asked, does not having an investor letter detriment your proposal? And what I had responded to Christina, it just depends. And to me, and would love to hear everybody else's points too, but this is just my opinion. It just depends on your technology, and it depends on, on the work that you're doing. Because sometimes it would be better. I mean, I like to have, and I think, Dan, you've said this, like a letter of support from a customer that says that if you build this thing and if it works, that they'd be willing to buy it. A letter of support from a technical person saying that this thing is valid. It was really, all this stuff. And then maybe an investor from, or a letter from an investor. But sometimes it's better for your companies to have more letters of support from a customer, or more letters of support from a technical person. And because it just depends on the scope of work that you're doing. And so really the whole intention for the letters of support is just to show that team, show that you have support and all of that. And I got way too much in the weeds, and I'm going to pull back on that. So sorry. That's why I don't need to talk, and I just need to type.
And I would just add to that. I mean, so investor letter support, they're really for a phase one. And I think the ones from Arkansas, that's lovely that you guys have the state agency, you can lean on that. And it's a great program. But usually what I get from letters of support is somebody that might be in the space. And it's like Katie just said a minute ago, talking about the customers, if it's all contingent, So usually from investors, I'll write them a letter of support that typically our investments are from, from $1 to $5 million in startup funds. If you can do this, and this, or even complete phase two, those are you're the kind of investment we'd like to make. I mean, it's just amazingly general. And I don't think I've ever approached an investor or a fund that turned that letter down. I'm not sure, but yeah. So and I think it has a little bit of validity. But Katie's right. The customers are most important. The technical ones are good, but a lot of times those are your collaborators. So keep that in mind that they're really so they could be in letters of support in that area, or you could just add them to the budget justification. But usually all my collaborators, when you have to do your consulting letters, I have a paragraph in there talking about how good an idea it is that you have, that type of thing. So they sort of become a letter of support too at
Hey,
the same.
Dan.
Yeah.
And Karen, I was just going to mention too that sometimes in the customer letter support, you could consider like associations, organizations. So for instance, if you have a technology that's going to help stroke patients, you know, maybe there's the National Association of Stroke, you know, whatever that kind of association or nonprofit that deals
Yep.
specifically with those diseases and things like that. And they could indicate an interest. They could also discuss about the significance of the problem. So that's another thing to keep in mind too.
Yeah. That
I added that to the template. Thank you for that
yeah,
reminder.
that is so true. I actually had a guy that got quite a bit of money working on some Alzheimer's device for Alzheimer's, and we got a letter of support from an association, Alzheimer's Association, or actually a foundation out of the East Coast. And we got turned down in our phase one, but they actually came back and funded the phase one, or gave us $500,000 to do that phase one work. And then, well, that work and that turned into a fast track, NIH fast track that, I mean, it just sort of snowballed from there. So keep that in mind with the associations are key. You know, you're looking for customer aggregators. So any association, you know, if you're working with diabetes, it's like if you're working with the Diabetes Association, they have better reach into that population than any one doctor would have or one clinic. So
Okay, great. And also, Noreen asked, Noreen, when you were talking about the STTR, were you talking about the state SBIR match? Was that your question at the time?
Yes, Catherine already answered it.
Okay, she did. Okay, great. I'm still catching up on the chats. And then Joshua said, consider PitchBook to identify investors of companies similar to yours. Can somebody talk about access to PitchBook?
I have it.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
nice.
Okay.
Through the UARC, anybody that has UARC email has access to it. Katie, do you have PitchBook too? No?
I
Okay.
know, and I'm like, I need to get a York email.
We don't either, but I learned that Forge has access to it, and they said they would share it with me and my clients. So I have a UALR email, so we don't have it. Okay, so
And
let's
those who
see.
are not familiar with PitchBook, a very high level understanding of what I have. It's just shows the different investments that are happening with different industry and all that. So you can kind of get a good idea of what investments are happening and that landscape. For those that aren't.
It literally shows who gave money to who and how much. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our slideshow. Let's keep moving forward. I'm just doing a quick time check. We have till 2:30 today, I believe. So let's get back into the research strategy section. So here we are in our week 2. And again, we're meeting every other week just to kind of work in lockstep and keep everybody moving forward. And today we're going to talk about the approach, that little circle to the right, because that is really, as we were talking about earlier, that's the work plan. That's the heart of your proposal write-up. Even though all these other things are still needed, we're just honing in on kind of this process to get you there and keep you focused on your collection and your assembly and your writing of this stuff. Okay, so Dan is going to remind us with his beautiful graphic.
Yeah, I mean, it's once again, it's all, you know, we're reiterating, you know, just all right, problem, innovation, work plan, outcomes, and these things are the same thing. The project summary, I ignore the project summary and abstract and narrative because we do those at the very end. But your specific aims is the problem, the innovation, the work plan, the outcome. And then the research strategy sort of is the same thing. The significance is a problem. Innovation is innovation still. The approach is sort of the work plan, or is the work plan. And then within the work, that approach part is you talk about the outcomes, or you finish up that thing, that section with the outcomes. We'll help you with that. All right.
Okay. So what is this section? It's what is the work that needs to be done to show that your innovation is feasible? So this is NIH's definition. We literally copied and pasted from their instructions. Okay. So take a minute just to kind of absorb.
This is the high level instruction for the research plan. And then if you look at that template, there's the red stuff is for each separate section, but this is what they're trying to get you to.
Okay, so now in the approach section, which is 4 of the 6 pages.
And the 4 pages is just sort of a guideline. I mean, you got 6 pages in total. I mean, you certainly don't want to spend 6 pages defining what the problem is, but so usually it's 1 page for the significance-ish, 1-ish pages, 1 page for the innovation-ish, and then 4 pages for the approach. If you have preliminary data, I like to put that sort of at the end of the innovation and right before the approach. So your innovation section might be another, a half a page longer, a page and a half or so. So, I mean, if you have preliminary data, it's probably going to take up a little bit of space, which is good. We need preliminary data.
And I think I'm the one who questioned, why are we starting with the approach? And you said, well, let's show them what an approach looks like. So we found what we think is a good example. And this is in your instructions and template folder, but this is one of the finished winners. And so the sample proposal is a proposal that was awarded. And how much time do we have to drill down? Do you want me to go to page 77?
Yeah. And blow that way up.
Okay. Oops, wrong 77. Oh, it's not going to give it to me. Okay, I might have to scroll down. Hold, please. Appreciate your patience while I scroll through a very long finished proposal looking for page numbers. Well, there's not actually any page numbers, are there?
Yeah. Oh,
here you are. I'm almost there. 74, 75, 76. There we go. You can start to see approach. Okay. Can you see it?
Yeah, but use your little magnifying glass blower upper thing on your viewer there at the bottom. Let's see.
No, this guy. Whoa.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah. So I can't even remember what this one was about, but I mean, SA1. So one of the things that you'll notice is a lot of people, instead of saying specific aims because it takes up a lot of space, people will just call things SAs. And then, and scroll down and give people a sense of how much detail there is in each one of these specific aims. Here they're doing all these different, so a film array, different essays to do this stuff. They talk about the milestones. NIH is big about risk. What are the risks to this specific aim? How are you mitigating those risks? Sometimes I see it for each specific aim. Sometimes I see it at the bottom of this section, a paragraph talking about the potential different risks. But talking about risk, if you don't talk about risks, a reviewer is going to mention that you didn't talk about risk. So you need to talk about risk. And these guys have some preliminary data, which they talk about a little bit in table 2 and text. So but you get a sense of, for you scientists, I mean, you're used to this stuff, but it's it's very sciencey. So for people that aren't scientists, even if you're doing software or something, you need to be as technical as possible about the tools you're using, about the methods you're using, what kind of standards you're following, all those types of things is really important. We can't just be, sort of just general. We can't just sort of be really general about what we're doing. We have to show that we are experts in this space. We have to build our credibility by saying, okay, we know that there's these ISO standards for testing blood, or these for storing blood, or these other standards. Whatever we're doing, we need to know what those standards are. Or if we're doing some kind of experiments, a lot of times there's, describing the whole experiment takes too much time. But if you're using a standard approach, you can reference that. Hey, I'm using the FAME approach, whatever FAME is, but I'm using, and then put a reference on it if it's coming from a different paper or something. So that's ways of saving some space. But you need to show that other people have done something in the space probably, and that you're building upon that foundation as one way of looking at it. But that's so the reason this is so important, and everybody, I mean, it's just this is so important, is this is what's driving your budget. This is what you're actually doing. And if you don't get this right to begin with, it's hard to, we don't want to be doing this last minute, because then we're changing everything. We're changing budgets, we're changing aims. Our aims are changing, things are moving around on us. We might take out a whole aim that wipes out some of our innovation section. So that's why it's so important to really get this approach nailed down right off the bat. Or at least in my approach to these things, that's why it's so important. I think that's all we have to do on that.
Yeah, we just wanted to show the approach today. And again, we're leaving you with the slides if you want to look back at that one through that link that we included. So talk a little bit more about the work plan in specifically, Dan. And does everybody understand when we say work plan, do you understand where we are? That kind of makes sense.
Yeah. So once again, we're looking at, what are our, the big question is, how do we go? We're going to cure cancer, and for $300,000, nobody's solving that big picture of curing cancer, right? So we're breaking it down into a phase one technical objective, which is the technical objective is to show the feasibility of X, right? I want to show that I can do this, and to show the feasibility of, using a software program to better help children nutrition. These are the research questions I need to ask. It's how sticky is it going to be? And then from each research question, I'm going to end up with these multiple tasks to answer that research question. So that's sort of how it's built. Think about it that way. And we're going to show you like 8 different ways to try to think about it. And hopefully something grabs somebody's, but that's one way of looking at it. And flip to the next page, I think, is more of our black box. Tax reform. So here's another way of looking at the work plan. We have inputs. So this is almost on the task level, the work plan level. We have the inputs, which are who, what, when, where. We have people that are inputs, materials, facilities, programming languages, season, like for some of the farmer people out there for USDA. I mean, season can be an input. Then we have this process, which is this black box of, this is how I'm actually testing this stuff. So I have all these inputs. I'm going to actually do the test on the lab bench doing this stuff. And then and then from that, here's my outputs, findings, milestones, reports, designs, prototypes, proof, feasibility. Those are my outputs. So I have these inputs I need to describe, what the process is. I need to describe what the outputs or deliverables are going to be. Deliverables are sort of where NIH is going nowadays.
And Dan,
To that.
when you first explained this to me, you said everybody knows what the black box is, Karen, and I was like, I didn't, but to me, it's the magic. It's like your secret sauce. This is what happens in the
Well,
black box is your how, right?
Well, it can be. I mean, on a global level, that's true. But this is like when we're talking about a task within our research, this this might be the process might be a well-known experimental process at the lab bench. So that process could be the process. But in a global way, the process is your magic sauce. So
Yeah.
if you looked at this in context of what your product is, you have the same thing. You have inputs, you do some kind of process, and you have outputs. I mean, it's sort of the same thing. You can do it on global level too.
Okay. So you had a few questions, and we've
I-
talked about
oh,
this.
yeah.
Oh, and there's a Gantt chart sample if you want to look at that. That's a little simpler than the work plan matrix that we showed, but a lot of times we coach our clients to use the Gantt chart and just kind of copy and paste it. We have a template for you where you can copy and paste it from an Excel spreadsheet into your proposal. So you don't have to, you can just create it in Excel and then pick it up and put it in your final proposal document. So that's there for you as well. That's okay. Did you want to talk about Dream Team some more?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, Dream Team. So if we think back at our little, I don't know, the pre-proposal area, collaborators was a part of that pre-proposal stuff. Is the idea of the Dream Team. It's like, so you have collaborators that are going to be Dream Team members. So, we don't want just any scientist, any artificial intelligence scientist. We want somebody that's adding credibility to your proposal. That's the goal. So, if you can have anybody in AI in the world, well, we can't do the whole world, but anybody in the United States that's studying AI, who would that person be? What papers have they written? So usually I do literature searches and see who's been writing the most in this space. If I'm looking for a scientist, if I'm looking for a national laboratory that might be doing, I mean, the USDA has all these national laboratories for wood or for nutrition or whatever. So I might want to look at, they would be part of my dream team. So those are the collaborators that we're looking for. One of the things to think about is if you're doing a piece of software and you're not a software developer yourself, or if you're trying to solve a problem with a piece of software, keep in mind that sometimes you're better off hiring somebody and somebody being a company, subcontracting and getting the credibility of the whole company as opposed to trying to hire individuals on your own for the company. And you might not have as much credibility from those individuals. So think about those, think about that context. So that's the collaborator side. Customers. So who are you talking to, or who would be your customer? Would they be somebody that you can pull into a phase 1 or phase 2? A lot of times I am working with a customer who is interested in the research, first off, and by them giving me a letter of support or even participating, reviewing the research findings, and I can talk about them being a part of the project that way. They're adding some credibility to me, and they're also being exposed to my potential product, right? So that's a reason that we might want the customers on your dream team. Industry associations, sort of like we talked about earlier about industry associations. They can provide expertise. A lot of times there's subject matter, what you call a subject matter expert or SME if you want to. So those are things during that whole churning, that pre-proposal area. That's what we're thinking about. How can we, if I'm going to be successful in chasing this idea down, what people do I need? What partners do I need? I think that's it for Dream Team.
Yeah, it is. And we've been working with most of you one-on-one. And so fortunately, like especially our research institution based folks have their partners, but you may find us asking you about these other sources if it's relevant to your project. And then we have some community-based entrepreneurs in the cohort as well who need to add some of these partners to their teams to strengthen them. And so the reason, if it sounds like something you already know or you're familiar with, it's because we do, regardless of where you start on your project, these are important connections to make. Okay, Michaela has a comment. Do you want to come off mute, Michaela, and tell us what's going on?
Yeah, I'm coming down a little bit sick, but we're not in person, so this is fine. Yeah, so this is partially my instance with the software thing. As a person who doesn't do software, I'd be bringing some of the women's health perspective that we're trying to build into the software. But I've met with Bears Development, who is a leading, I guess, industry expert. Would it make sense to list them as a collaborator if we got a quote for things that we would need from them? But we are planning to use SBIR money to solely like hire these guys.
So you're going to hire them as a subcontractor? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Does it make sense to list them as collaborators in that
Well,
instance?
I mean, they sort of are subcontractor. I mean, collaborators are sort of anybody, whether they're a professor that might be a consultant or a subcontractor or whatever. So yeah, they would be collaborators for you. And that's usually what I call people when I talk about, describing the team at the beginning of the approach section. I usually talk about collaborators. So I say, these are the people in the company, here's if I have a subcontractor, I would say these, and here are our collaborators, subcontractor, whoever it is. Here are the consultants, and then we might have a project advisory board that just have a very small role where they're looking at looking just sort of the output of your. So they might be industry experts or thought leaders in the industry that might be a project advisor. So those are all sort of your collaborators. But yeah, your software guys are definitely a collaborator. They're perfect. It's good to have them. I'm glad you found somebody.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Any other questions or comments? I see that Joshua said yes, definitely include them for a quote. Any other shares? Would anybody like to share? Okay, all right. Moving forward. Another diagram. Okay. Why are we talking about process?
Well, all right. So I love block diagrams. So this was a USDA funded project that I did. It was about mentoring, and it's a piece of software, so matching mentors and mentees. And I just want to show the idea of product components in one case, and then sort of this theory of the learner optimization. But the product components, a lot of times, if you see this, there's this line down there separating phase 1 and phase 2. So when I'm describing innovation, the innovation section for this project, I was basically talking to each one of these squares. What's the assessment wizard do? Why do you need that? What do we get out of that? What's this interaction builder? What's that piece of software look like? What are we getting out of that? So those are the type of things. It's a lot of times helpful for somebody to look at a diagram and have words that are matching up so they sort of follow along. And the same thing happened. This is more of an idea of the theory for learner optimization. So it was like, there was a cultural component, the mentor theories around mentors, the learning preferences theories that I talked about, all ending up, all impacting the learner ultimately. And, how do we take all that and using technology to put that into an NA enterprise, and that was in Native American. So this was pre-current world. So this was targeted. I was using Navajo Nation for testing this idea. I wouldn't do that today, so just keep that in mind. But those are the kind of block diagrams. I mean, think about process. I'm sitting here
Yeah.
scrambling while you were talking.
Yeah,
trying to-
not everybody's going to have one of these. And you've seen in the model one that we put up earlier, there are charts, and obviously some of the molecular processes, some of the bio processes are going to be charts because you're giving an illustration of what you're talking about in the narrative. And that's pretty common, right? That's pretty natural. But sometimes it helps the reviewers, and we brought this up, that it helps to have a visualization if the illustration helps describe the process. It may help shortcut their understanding, or as they're reading a lot of proposals, so sometimes a picture does paint 1,000 words, right? So we're just talking about ways to get you to think about perhaps aiding the comprehension of your reader while you're writing the proposal, so that you come up with these different ways to understand the information. And Joshua added draw.io, mermaidchart.com, and chat. I don't like Chat's drawing, but he was giving us a couple of other tools, which is great to help. And there are some that do decision trees too. Sometimes you can find these free helps online. You may still have to draw a lot of your own things, but sometimes these things can be great starters. Yeah, he says, yeah, they're great starting points. Agree. And they can be time savers, or they could create more work, but but it is helpful sometimes to use some of the tools. All right, what did you find another one, Dan? Do you want to share?
Let's see. Let me see if I'm trying to find. I did this one chart 5 or 6 years ago that was a comparison of manufacturing. So it was funded by MTech, which is the Department of Defense, sort of their health funding area, and sort of comparing one manufacturing process and getting money to devise a new one. And that's the one I'm trying to find, and I can't find it. But a lot of times a comparison, if you have a process and your innovation is changing a process, that comparison is very valuable. If you can show, okay, I'm going to take a process that was 10 days and involved 38 steps, and I'm going to turn it into a process that takes 3 days and is 4 steps, that's where the value is. So a lot of times that process, and that comes into play with software. I think whether it's, hiring new employees or processing claims data or whatever, that showing that difference where you're gaining that time and efficiencies is another nice thing to do in a comparison in a block diagram. But I don't have that, so you can go on now.
Well,
Sorry.
and I guess what I want to emphasize is the reason that we're offering these, illustrations is that it's different for every proposal. Of course, not all of these things that we're showing will apply to you, but in your one-on-ones, you may hear from us, from your consultants.
Karen, we can't hear you again.
Oh, all right. Oh gosh. Can you hear me now? That is so crazy. I think I'm going to need a new computer, even though they just gave me this one. I don't know what's going on. Or my connectors, I don't know. But so if as you're working one-on-one with your consultants, it's our jobs to read your proposals like reviewers would read them. And so if something is not readily clear, or if we think that a figure or an illustration can help, and maybe the illustration could even help you cut words, because remember, this total section is only 6 pages. So we might just, pause every once in a while and say, okay, could this actually be illustrated, or could we put something here? And so we're just warning you that those are the things that help make these more readable, and also could potentially help with your competitiveness. Oops. Okay. All right. Budget.
Yeah. Sure. So start thinking about the budget is what we want to do, is start thinking about what costs. So sort of back to that, your work plan matrix, how many hours are something going to be to do? how much money is needed for lab supplies? Do you need to rent a piece of equipment? Generally, I'd say you don't want to buy, you really shouldn't buy, and you'll get dinged trying to buy pieces of equipment. So if you have a specialized piece of equipment you need that's expensive, you need to start working with the vendor of figuring out how you can rent it for the duration of your project. So if you have a $20,000 piece of equipment, you can, you might be able to rent it for the month that you need it for, $5,000 or $4,000 or whatever. So I've seen that happen a lot. But, if you put a $20,000 piece of equipment in your proposal, it's going to get cut out no matter what. I've almost never seen a phase one proposal have a big piece of equipment that was left in there. I don't think I've ever seen it, to tell you the truth. Phase two, you might be able to get away with something, but phase one, that's not the case.
Dan, I clicked on the help that we put on the slide because this is also just a quick recap of all the pieces of the proposal. Sort of juxtaposed against the review criteria. It's just an extra learning tool if you want to go back and check, do I have everything I need? Am I addressing everything that the reviewers are going to be looking for? So that's just another one that we put on the slide, just to get you better prepared with the what do I want to say? It's like the gestalt. We're still at the 30,000-foot view, and you're sort of still looking at it just so you understand all the pieces that you're going to need if we're chunking things trying to get you there. But we want you to be aware of what you're working towards as well. So we just put an extra help in there. Okay, so we're doing good on time. It's 2:15. We promised we get you out of here by 2:30. So your homework for the next 2 weeks before we meet again. Continue a course on everything that you've already started on. Keep working with your consultants and your co-counseling group, one-on-one or in your small group meetings. And then you should be, in addition to that, hopefully working on the actual work plan and the pretty pictures, and consequently the pieces of your budget, because as you're assembling your team, you are collecting quotes. You're starting to assemble the tasks and the money and time associated with each of those while you're building your team. So it's kind of fluid. It's not as carved in stone as we're sometimes making it look. But all of you are moving forward. And so regardless of where you are right now or, what you still have left to do, you're all doing great. You're all tracking. So just wanted to offer you a little additional encouragement that you're doing it right, even if it feels kind of messy right now. Okay. Was there anything else? Our thank you to our sponsors.
Yeah, I can't think of anything else, but if anybody, we got a little bit of time. If anybody has specific questions, we can certainly mess those up, cause some more confusion without too much problem, I'm sure.
Hey,
So,
Karen, where is
Yes.
this information located? Is it available on Drive?
The actual slideshow?
Yeah, or that template that you had?
Oh, yes. Those should be in do you have the link to the folder that's called instructions and templates?
Yeah, okay. Thank you so
It
much.
should
I
all
don't
be
have-
in there. You don't have it, Noreen?
No, I couldn't.
Okay.
I'm dictating, but I couldn't figure it out. Where it is.
I will make sure that I send the hot links again in the follow-up email. I'll make sure that you have that ready and, accessible in an email. So when we finish up, we'll follow up, go back to the email, you can find everything there. And it'll take you to the places, to these resources.
So-
Also, what's happening when we meet one-on-one, we can set up the workspace so that if you don't have your workspace yet, that we are all working on the same document. We're sort of just trying to walk with you in lockstep. Oh, Noreen, I'm sorry, you have a question.
I'm just having a question. So our homework for this week is to work on approach.
Yes, to work on approach. And that's, again, that's still an iterative process. So the other things don't necessarily stop happening, but it's a good thing unless you've already got them done. Check, check, check. But this is the next big chunk that we want you to start focusing on and honing in on.
And probably what I would do is I would do sort of an outline of approach and go from there. Because once you get at least an outline of the approach of what you want to do, I'd probably go from there to the budget, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to write about, tasks that you're doing and then all of a sudden do the budget and figure out it's out of scope. So I think once you write your outline, and you should probably have a pretty good sense of how much time those tasks are going to take, and we can start working with the budget. So when we're doing approach in the next couple of weeks, when we meet with people, I would like to talk about the approach and then also talk about the budget at the same time, because they sort of go so hand in hand. Um, and in 5 minutes I can help somebody with a budget. So don't,
So
spend.
Noreen, do you have a partner or an outsource? Are you outsourcing some of the work?
Yeah, I am totally lost in the budget section because I don't know how much money does it has to go to the like chemical supply side or the work side, or how much money, because if you are saying if it is a 51 percentage for the PI, then how we should adjust it in terms of budget.
51 so are you doing an STTR? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, that's what I'm also still not able to decide which route I am taking, but I need help in this, I guess.
So keep in mind, everybody, for the PI, for the SBIR, if you have a PI, if you want the company PI to be the PI, they have to be 51% employed by the company. Now, that doesn't mean that they have to have 51% of their time on the project, but they have to show payroll. In a perfect world, somebody's getting paid for 40 hours a week. You have to show that they're getting paid at least 20 hours a week. And then, a portion of that can be on other projects, right? So it gets a little bit weird when you think about it. Like for my company, because I had other work going on, it was easy for me to say, okay, I'm going to spend, I don't know, 400 hours on this project over the next year, because I was 51% employed by my company. So it was pretty easy to do. But if the only project you have is the SBIR project, have your company PI needs to be 51% employed by that activity, So, and usually this stuff is a little bit easier if we just go through it in the budget, one-on-one, because everybody's sort of unique. But we can do that pretty quick. But now the STTR, the beauty of the STTR is with that, the company, the PI can actually be from the research institute, and then the company can have its own sort of PI or project PI that's not required to be 51% employed. So that's a nice, easy way around stuff. You end up with a whole bunch of different headaches doing an STTR, but that becomes a little bit simpler. And the fact that you can do the money, you can get more money to the research institute if that's who's going to be doing most of the research. So, yeah. But I mean, one-on-one meetings, and I'm happy.
We can schedule one-on-ones.
Yeah, and I'm happy to,
Oh,
like
she can.
anybody, I'm happy to jump on a budget discussion with anybody. It's anytime, because that's the main reason. I mean, it's all scope. Things get rejected because of scope and messed up budgets and all that stuff. So we can keep that straight for everybody. Once again, I learned all that the hard way.
I'm sorry about the problems with the audio again, but okay, happy to help.
Yeah.
Okay.
The let me share for a second. And
okay.
I just want one of the things So now let's see if I can do this without sharing. Whatever. All right. All right. So this is back to our template and checklist that's out there. The very first page of that, I'm saying read the instructions, read the instructions, read the instructions. So make sure you read the instructions. And I have to read the instructions every time. I read the whole solicitation every time, even though it's 98% the same from, year to year for NIH. And same thing with the instructions. The instructions get updated, every 18 months or so. So I'm always digging through that stuff. So read the instructions. And the other thing is there's actually 4 solicitations having to do with SBIR, STTR. There's 2 of them are these ones that are crossed out, PA 24-248 and 246. They are clinical trial required. So nobody here is doing any clinical trials, so do not use those. And then these other 2, most people are going to be using the 24-245. If you're doing an STTR, you use the 24-247. So, but most people will be on those 2 things. And, I'd like to recommend to everybody that's been messing around with grants.gov and ERA Commons and Assist, whichever tool you want to use to start your proposal. I would go out and start a proposal, put in, go ahead and just go out and start the proposal, make sure that everything's set up well enough that you're not getting rejected right off the bat, because a lot of times it takes a minute to figure out, why won't it let me do a proposal, submit a proposal or do anything. But I think it's a good time to start getting oriented with those things on Assist or grants.gov, whichever one you want to use. All right, that's all I have.
Anything else for the good of the order?
Mhm.
Is everybody taking a nap? When your cameras are off, we don't know what you're doing. No, Essie, yes, I wasn't talking about you, Essie. She came back on. I just don't know if anybody is confused or bored or
We know they're bored.
overloaded or
That's
doing their email. So I'm just checking in, and we are at our close, and we will be talking to you again one-on-one, making sure that we have those meetings set up and that everybody's moving forward. Again, these meetings, the every other week, are just to kind of hit the overview and just keep moving forward. The real work happens between these meetings, your homework. So we're just excited that you're taking this journey, and then we get to go on this journey with you. I thank you again for your patience and for your time, and hope that everybody's feeling okay about things.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's a wrap.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.